a good starting point. So yeah, so I've been doing walking. I'm an integrative psychotherapist. I also do model of coaching as well. And I started doing walking therapy about 11 years ago, funnily enough, when I was actually a recovery worker working in the NHS. So I was working alongside social services, dual diagnosis workers in Queen Mary's Hospital in South London, of which over the other side of the road is Richmond Park. And I was doing a lot of motivational interviewing techniques, but I wasn't a counsellor at that time. So what I had is I had a lot of feedback from the clients that had sat down with their counsellors and the pitfalls that they were currently facing. Those with massively high anxiety, were in rooms with a gurney. There was no windows. It's quite in some NHS spaces there are windows, in others there really aren't. And the other problem that we had single mothers who couldn't afford childcare, bringing their child into the therapy room, and of course it was a disruption to the therapy session, and of course they couldn't maintain the therapeutic process for very long. So me, having been someone in the past who had massive anxiety, massive OCD when I was young, you want to sit me down in front of someone for sort of 50 minutes, it's excruciating. And I found that the old belief was very much, or an old belief, I feel, and one I think we need to adapt out of, was I think it's been, there were some times I definitely had sessions in a room and I loved it, and also providing it to clients as well. Absolutely. But I think we're at an age now where we need to provide the alternative. I found myself, the biggest thing I found was this thing that the window of tolerance that we have. And I found that sometimes, where we can conceivably sit, when we can maybe conceive that we're helping clients, there's a certain intensity in the room. Sometimes we can feel some of that tension, that free floating anxiety. People can sit with feelings. That doesn't necessarily mean that is progressive to their mental health or progressive to their process. It can actually sometimes mean that clients are becoming hyper aroused, and hyper arousal levels are shooting past the window of tolerance, and they're going into fight, flight, or freeze mechanisms. And this is absolutely what I found when I started actually taking clients. um, I went rogue. I didn't do what I was meant to do, but I did what the clients needed me to do. And I'm not your Mother Teresa type. I actually did what I wanted to do, because I can't, sitting down, I found really hard, really hard. And I love walking in nature. So I started giving it a go. And in the first two sessions, for those that could not open up in the therapy room, and it wasn't even about the quality of relationship that was actually happening at the time, it was this confrontational thing happening, and it was the environment, it was the space. When you walk in nature, I mean, as you guys will know better than anyone else, and I don't think it's ever been measured, but you can definitely feel it, the levels of dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin that the brain produces, and also the fact that you walk side by side, you don't have this confrontational aspect with a therapist, really does the difference from a client being stuck in that fight, flight, or freeze position completely changed. And it was like the process begun. So I think from doing this for many years, I think that one of the biggest problems I faced, of course, was I'll go through the assessment and boundaries, transference, and et cetera, was who is it appropriate for? Who is it appropriate for? Just before I get to that bit, I just want to mention in the NHS, I actually trained up a whole team in Charity Mind. And since the time I've trained the entire team, the waiting list has dropped by 60 to 70%. So walking therapy also helps those looking to basically seek and have therapy in the NHS, or in a sort of a project, or somewhere like that. It's about the amount of rooms for counsellors and the amount of clients on a waiting list as well. And this really changes it completely, So you can see within 60, 70%, increase in people being seen it's a really important takeaway. And also, when you're working in the NHS, I found myself where the models can be quite limited, whether it be CBT, whether it be IAPT or motivational techniques. From my perspective as a therapist, it really opens it up. So what actually happened with boundaries is when I first started, I had no model, I had no training. I'd heard that a guy in New York was doing walking therapy, and I thought I'm going to give it a go. And I instantly saw the benefits with some clients. Um, and but also one of the constraints I had was it was very unknown. I was very nervous about potential complaints procedures, um, keeping the client safe, as Sam said. Where's safe, what's not unsafe. Where can a client relax, enough for them to be able to sit, stay with the flow, stay with the process, really open up. I learned the hard way, put it that way. I really did. So I found with certain borderline clients on a spectrum, those that are kind of really, not in a great place, it's a massive no-no. And that's where indoor therapy, I feel, needs far more containment than actually walking therapy could actually provide in nature. I started actually working out in with trauma, with both sexual abuse, DV, addiction sort of rehabs, and I moved to working into the City of London. So when I moved to the City of London, I also found that those with NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, I felt again you can't be kind of you've got NPD, so I'm not going to treat you. But I found these clients would be like, I'm going to go this way, Jonathan. I'm going to go that way. I want to go here. I want to go and get a pint. And I'm like, you really can't do that, you know. But essentially, I found that the boundaries were really opened up, so it became a lot more informal. One of the benefits of walking therapy is its informality, but there are certain things that we can do to maintain those boundaries. And I provide now walking therapy training, and the training was overseen by the BACP, the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy, for this reason. So there are only very few clients that I would give a walking therapy to. Sometimes I do the assessment, I do a 10-minute free consultation, and I know whether it's going to be someone I want to work with that's going to be appropriate for walking therapy or not. I think something Sam mentioned, it's not just about the clients that say, I want to have indoor therapy. We need to kind of start introducing it to clients. It's our responsibility. I don't think every client instantly knows what's good for them. So I wrote a book called Walk with Your Wolf, and it was very much at the time addressing the work stress epidemic. So again, if you're sitting in front of the computer, if you're sitting in a workplace, if you're in that work stress, I had 90% of those clients were going work, home, work, home, work, home. And there was a green space just up the road, and they never went there. They may have gone there once in 2 years, once every 3 years. So we're just this addicted to adrenaline, addicted to work society. And the minute they came out, it was like, wow, I had no idea this was here. So part of what we're doing is we are reintroducing people back to nature. And we're also saying, whilst this process is going on, in the interim of sessions, walking is a great tool to be able to process the thoughts and feelings that you have dealt with during the session. Not only that, it provides, if you kind of link a lot of your reflections creatively to nature, as the seasons change over the course of the year, the client can start seeing their change, number one, so they can see the change. I remember, so where were you last autumn? Where were you last winter? Where were you last summer? You know, but also kind of what's actually happening is when a client is actually going through this process, we're out in the outdoors, we make reflections. So when you're kind of very static sitting down, and I want to place an emphasis on something you're going to remember, imagine we're walking and I suddenly stop. I'm very dramatic. So anyway, when we stop, it's fun for the client. They're like, why has he stopped? I'll give over my reflection, but also there's a difference. If I've got a beautiful setting in the background, the client will look over my shoulder to process their thoughts and feelings. 5 years later down the line, I've had clients going, I remember where you were when you delivered that reflection. When I've been on walks, I've seen a similar environment. I remember sort of where we were. So we can plant our reflections, we can combine them into nature, we can actually entwine them. So it's very much, we can work creatively with nature. Again, physical movements, when you're sitting down, you can't actually really be fully expressive. And that can actually hold in a lot of the feelings that we have. I'm all very much hands. And also when we move, it does sort of relax you physiologically. The oxytocin when you walk in nature does also relax you, Sam was talking about. And this does allow just clients to open up a lot more about their feelings. It just does, you know. So things like, but also you see a lot more. There's a lot of stimulus outside in nature, you know. We talk about, how it may trigger certain countertransferences. But for instance, I had a client that was kind of walking, they were very, very depressed. Again, I think of a client said, I don't want to do walking therapy today. I said, actually, today I think you need to do it more than anything. So sometimes I think we have to kind of push our clients a little bit out of their comfort zone. And walking therapy allows you to do that. I've had clients that would not engage in the therapeutic process because they couldn't stand sitting in front of a therapist. However, we've started doing walking therapy, and we've also at certain moments gone back into the therapy room. And then we've gone back out again. And you have this wonderful transition, and the client can feel their progress in that respect as well. And also it's worked vice versa. I've had clients that kind of very, very comfortable in the therapy room. And then you can say just one day, would you like to do a walk and talk? When you're doing walking therapy, the training that I do, boundaries are you don't come dressed in spandex. That's one boundary. Trust me, I'm sure it does happen. I've known it to happen. You still dress as a therapist does. So that's one boundary. You have walks. I have 5 different walks that I do with each client. Each of them I've gone through. I've timed it. I've got a client's medical history, which is all in the contract that you provide to begin with. You also state in the contract because we've got to do health and safety for ourselves as well. Um, so if I would say I need to get back to this walking point in 50 minutes, for instance. If a client has a protest and you're 25, 30 minutes into a walk and you've got to get back for your client, they're going, I'm not going anywhere, Jonathan. You've got to have that in place. But equally, one could say, well, why do walking therapy? You could also have a client sitting in a room pushing you past time. And it can be a struggle in some instances to actually get them out of the room. It's the same way. I've become more aware of my boundaries doing walking therapy than I ever did in an indoor setting, if I'm honest with you. Boundaries are, please wear appropriate gear. Don't come on a rainy day to a walking therapy session in high heels or in really smart shoes on Wimbledon Common. It ain't gonna work. Yeah. Also, bring an umbrella. The amount of people, 7 out of 10 people could not bring an umbrella. For teenagers, I developed a thing called a walking therapy bag. So whether it's their iTunes, iPods, music they want to share with them, things that they might collect on the walk as they're going, it's a much more creative way of working. But also it showed me instantly the manageability of the client, the ability to get organized. And also when it's raining, it's a bit raining in the contract. If it's absolutely throwing it down, if it's waterlogged and it's, you can't actually physically see, then it's like there's no session. However, there have been days where it's raining and I'm saying, get an umbrella, get prepared. There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad preparation. Some of those sessions have been the best. We've stood underneath a tree, we've had an umbrella. The intimacy in that moment, the drama of nature, the way that actually you hear the leaves when you're kind of walking, you do have that spiritual connection. You see people change. And for me, I've got to see a very different client from the one that sat down inside a therapy room and those that I do walking therapy with. The best model for me that has worked, of course, is the one that it can vary, And I think once clients have been on the different types of walks that you have, they can pick and choose. So basically my walks are very organized. I've made sure that there are benches. I know when I'm going to get back on time. And it's not about these kind of really complicated walks. It's about being in nature. It really is. With grief and people grieving, walking therapy has been second to none. And to be honest with you, we have sat down side by side and I always try to be by water. And I don't know what it is about water. But that thing, the surreal feeling that you have when you're bereaved, and we are in an environment where so many people we have not talking about grief as much as we should really be, because I think it's just too close, in my opinion. But I think people who are bereaved, who are grieving, and I think there's so many different types of losses that we have right now. I think the one consistency we have in a world where there are so many different types of inconsistencies is nature. And when we sat down with grieving, the silences are so much easier. They really, really are. You can sit with a board if it's more if you're doing clinical psychology, or more you're used to more clinical kind of practice. Sit down with a board, absolutely. Send some documents after the session and talk it through at the time. But sitting down with someone and witnessing someone's grief is incredibly powerful. It really, really is. And also, again, nature can be like a real way in, working more creatively with it. So with some clients, I might kind of say, what's standing out to you, what's standing out in nature right now? The hedgerow between there and the road. What is it about boundaries? Do you have many boundaries in your life right now? Well, yes, I'm trying to get rid of my partner. Or they're kind of moving out, or I don't have any boundaries. But also nature can become a way in. Absolutely. So I'm going to go back to, if my computer's working. It's actually died out. Anyway, doesn't matter. To answer some more of the questions that actually Sam had. Um, Let me see if I can just bring it in. Sorry, 1 second. Second. Yeah, here we go. Let me just go through. Yeah. Yeah, so basically, as I said, with the types of clients that it's suitable for, borderline, or what's it called, emotionally unstable personality disorder. Now, on a spectrum, it depends what on the spectrum that they're on. With some trauma, walking therapy is incredibly powerful, really useful because of EMDR, where EMDR actually came from, the movement from the eyes moving left to right. When you walk for trauma, to process trauma, walking therapy for me is second to none. We've been able to process trauma far more effectively than actually sitting down in a room, where actually I feel people can find it actually a bit more re-traumatizing. So the eye movement desensitization and reprocessing part of walking therapy is incredibly effective. NPD, it depends. I think with boundaries, what are you hear all the time? It's like walking with a friend. So boundaries, I say things, I've got scripts that I use. I'm so glad that you're feeling so comfortable in the therapeutic relationship. Just to kind of define, I am still your therapist here, you know? And of course, if it's with man to man or gender to gender, if there's erotic transference, and there can be more erotic because the relationship has relaxed a little bit more. That has allowed the client to kind of open up a little bit more. It's allowed the process to progress a lot more. But also, there, of course, where there's oxytocin, you feel more relaxed. You have to be very, very aware that there are no blurred boundaries in the relationship. So this is not, I don't feel this is about location. I don't feel it's the difference between indoor and outdoor, although I do feel outdoor loosens the boundaries a little bit more. I think it's down to the skill of the therapist, the boundaries to make it clear, the weight of how we sort of make it clear to each client that, this is a therapeutic relationship. But if you organize your walking therapy training sessions, which is what I do my training for, it's not like going for another walk. I've had a lot of therapists saying, I've done a walking therapy session, and it's just like going for a walk with a friend. When you do the training, I'm very aware of the pace that I walk. If a client gets angry, I might move a little bit quicker, as a way of them actually kind of channeling out that anger and their stress. Sometimes if a client is depressed, I would say, come on, let's get going, to get more endorphins in the brain, to get more dopamine, and for them to see at the end of the session, depression is not just in the mind, it's connected to you physiologically and spiritually. So the environment will massively affect your depression. It will. And also, what you do physiologically will also affect what's happening with your depression. Okay. So there's things that there's a lots of different tools that we use in walking therapy. It's not just going for a walk. And for me, the client will give so much more information in their body language. They might just suddenly walk away when you kind of give a kind of an intervention, and you go, make that reflection, notice the distance. I noticed when I said this, there was distance. What's filling that space? You know, in again, as I said, you're walking side by side and then suddenly look at a client. It places an emphasis on certain things that may have been spoken. Couples therapy, I do not. I tried doing that in nature, doesn't work. Don't do it. It's non-advisable. Thank you very much. ADHD, I think it's really good for ADHD. I think again, it's that sitting down. If you're someone like myself that needs to move, um, I think I think it's I think someone's actually sort of said about the outcomes of indoor therapy to outdoor therapy. I think this actually does need to be measured. Just to let you know, I'll tell in 11 years the progressiveness of indoor to outdoor therapy. I think I've gotten to where I've got to where I've needed to get to with a client quicker. And also I think it's made therapy far more enjoyable, natural, for a client, and actually they've stayed for a longer period of time. I think there's all sorts of barriers to indoor therapy as well, and I don't think we should just be looking in terms of outcomes of what we do or the environment one to one or walking outside in nature. As I said, if I'm working in the city and I'm held in a meeting and I can't get to the location, I've also done walking therapy over the phone as well. I have done that, you know, because I think right now we do need to adapt. There's lots of obstacles in the way, and I think we need to kind of get rid of those obstacles for a lot of people that still need therapy. And I think we need our clients to be the ones to say, this feels comfortable, that doesn't feel comfortable. I think we come with a clinical background. I do think we have to be aware of, I'm not going to be taking a client in walking into the woods. I'm not going to be doing that. I'm going to be walking into areas where there's still, there's still people around. There's still kind of light. Um, um, and I would say that actually for me, with all of my clients, the retention rate has been 90% when a client, and this is a stat that I can give you, when a client who's been indoor therapy to outdoor therapy, basically the retention rate for walking therapy has been 90%. When they've started doing it, they don't want to go back to indoor therapy. It feels far more comfortable for them. So basically, life transitions, I think anger, I think all of these things in a setting, when those boundaries, personal boundaries, come down a little bit more, as I said, I think with people being more relaxed, they're going to show a lot more of their true selves. That's what I think. I also think there's something about life transition that as we're changing through the process, nature's changing around us as well. So clients don't kind of feel alone in that respect. Confidentiality, I've worked in rooms where you can hear what's going on in the next door potentially. I think basically when you're doing walking therapy, if you see people walking down, there are places where there's a lot of traffic. There's places that are really, really quiet and you're not going to get disturbed, you know? It's all about doing your research, doing your homework before you actually, take a client out. Regent's Park, for instance, in London is a wonderful park. Certain times of day, it's really quiet. Other times, it's actually really, really busy. Um, I have found actually in walking therapy, it allows you to, as I said, to work with different models. The ones that I feel work well are the ones like attachment theory, evolutionary psychology, person centered, absolutely. Because also one of the biggest things about walking therapy, it's the neutrality of the space. It doesn't belong to me and it doesn't belong to the client. When you're walking into someone else's space, that's your space. Or if you're walking into the NHS, there's so many. I noticed this working in the NHS. You walk into the NHS, if you've had connections with the NHS, you will feel more of a label, or there will be memories attached to when you went into the NHS. And there's something really lovely about actually going into nature, that it actually provides this neutral platform from which to start point. I don't own it. My client doesn't own it. So we own that space together. And I think it kind of takes away any kind of feeling of power struggle. I think there's been less of a power struggle in nature than sometimes there can be in the therapy room, for instance. I feel a lot more clients, especially this year in the pandemic, have been coming to me for walking therapy. I do actually think it's not just about, I think the only way that evidence based research, I think, should continue now. with walking therapy. I would have loved all of my outcomes to have been measured properly over the last 11 years, because I think it would have shown the success rate. um, I think for me, the success rate is keeping the client in the process of therapy and not creating a rupture in that therapeutic process. I think in a day and age now where we're stuck in front of a computer, especially with the pandemic, or where we're stuck in our homes, sometimes when you take away something from your life, I think right now our lives have been restricted. Nature is the one thing that we have. Getting outside has new meaning. It has a completely different meaning for us, you know. The other positive about walking therapy, also from a financial point of view as well, is also if you are, and depending on how you work, if you're spending £50 on a room or room rent, or 25, £30 room, especially sometimes in the city of London, it can be as much as £60. And also sometimes it can be very hard to find a suitable space for a client. With walking therapy, you can change your settings. You can find a new setting. And also, it means that what you would save on room rents, let's say £60, it means that you can provide now a sliding scale for your client. So those that may not have been able to afford therapy before, it now becomes a possibility. And that's a massive one. I remember when I actually didn't have, two coins to rub together, and the difference of 20 to £30 is enormous, absolutely enormous. It really, really is. And also right now, it's that changing of stimulus. So I found when you get used to with a client, the environment, the impact of environment. With anxiety, I started doing more forest bathing, walking where there's just an ombre of trees. You hear the wind coming through it, you hear the birds. It decreases the cortisol, decreases anxiety, very much so. With trees, with someone in depression, it would actually feel more oppressive. What people who suffered depression needed was a more wide open space, because it felt sometimes a bit more overwhelming, but also it was actually getting them out of feeling like that, you know. So the process of having trees over you would feel more oppressive to me and more oppressive to a client. Working with people who had heavy trauma, the countertransference is me sitting down with a client with heavy trauma, especially issues like, let's say, sexual abuse, or kind of, even if it's gone deeper than that. By the end of the session, I'm absolutely exhausted, sitting down. When I've finished doing a walking therapy session, I have not felt that way. I felt energized. There is something about that heavy atmosphere in a therapy room that I feel actually is detrimental to clients who've been traumatized, because I feel potentially, if you're seeing several clients in trauma work and there's a very heavy energy left in the room, I'm not being all hippy dippy here, but I think anyone who's done trauma work, you will know there can be a lot of residual anxiety, residual feeling, and residual trauma left in that room. For the next client coming in, or if we feel a bit more traumatized, I feel it adds to a re-traumatizing process. The process of walking for a client in between sessions, if they're traumatized, massively helps literally ground them, decrease cortisol levels, retrains their nervous system as well. So for me, when I had massive anxiety, it wasn't about providing solutions for anxiety. It was about retraining my nervous system. Have a look at what nature does and how we feel at the beginning of the walk and the end of the walk. This is outside. This is outside. Hang on, has a strong evidence base for better with mood low. Forest bathing, massive, absolutely. So the thing is, I think we've got two things to look at here for evidence base. We know walking therapy helps anxiety. We know it helps depression. We have got numerous studies to show and prove. Not only that, when was the last time you went for a walk with a friend? Did you feel better? Have you walked with a friend? Do you feel better? If you feel better, I guarantee the chances of your clients feeling better is going to be exactly the same. I don't think if we're adding the therapy model or any psychological model into that, it's only going to improve or enhance what's already there. And that's what I think we need to look at. The stats, we know walking in nature helps. And I do feel that actually, when I was working in addiction centers, the one thing that was not in place was aftercare. The aftercare was absolutely appalling. It really was appalling. I don't know how it is now. Maybe it's got better. when we are delivering walking therapy, and you guys will know better than anyone else in terms of your knowledge base. Imagine during sessions, the client is experiencing the physiological changes, the psychological changes actively when you're walking, and you can explain to them in that moment why it's helping them. It means that actually they can go, I can do more of this in between each session, as I said, but after it as well. It's an ongoing aftercare. It's an ongoing aftercare. It really, really is. Okay. And we have huge, and also one of the things that we are teaching clients right now is we are learning to adapt and we lead by example. Okay. And we do need to adapt now. We're in a climate where I think a lot of people now, they just don't want it. I think there's a level there are levels of I think trauma that in terms of people are going to face. So with burnout, I just want to come back to these different spaces. With burnout, again, walking Richmond Park, wide open space, wonderful. There's something really powerful when I worked in Regent's Park. You've got the wonderful park there. You can see the buildings on the outside, you know. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie. You can say, you know, you feel that you're locked and trapped in the city. You know, this is only a 15, 20-minute walk away. One of the case studies who was actually in my book started walking every single day to work from Hampstead down to Goodge Street through Regent's Park. And as they were walking without getting onto the train, they said, oh, I know. They'd started noticing all the churches on the way. They went, I've never noticed that before, you know? So it's again, walking therapy is about helping people reconnect with life. The oxytocin, as I said, I think massively helps with the bonding process. With anyone who suffered from PTSD, if you're walking in an environment where there's more structure there, again, they feel not as hemmed in as they would in a therapeutic setting. But they also just feel kind of safe and secure. So again, as opposed to having the four walls that's more containing for a client, I've also got spaces that there are more kind of walls or historical walls, and we sit down there and we have exactly the same effect. Yeah. And I'm not opposed to actually, it doesn't have to just be about walking therapy. You can sit down next to someone on a bench. It's just being in nature. And we have a lot of um, options for that. How do I see the process? How long do I have?
So you've got about another 10 minutes of your kind of slot, and then we've got 10 minutes at the end for questions. And I've been looking at the chat, and there's various questions that we can put to both you and Sam at
I
the end
think
as well.
I think there have been a lot of questions, so I'm just going to finish up now, if that's okay. Because all I'm going to do is actually just go over stuff that stuff that I've done. Um, I'll be honest with you. I think that clients that have had walking therapy, I think in this day and age, I'm just going to say, I think right now we absolutely have got to provide an alternative. I will say this: we talk about adult burnout, we don't talk about teenage burnout, and a thing that I'm now calling lockdown burnout. I think with teenagers to sit opposite, I did walking therapy in King's College School in Wimbledon, and I provided it for 4 years where, you know, they would sit down and, you know, they got their, well, it's changed since my day. When in my day, when I sat down, I got my geography teacher, who was the person I actually had the issue with. I sit down, he thinks they were actually a counsellor. So essentially, now that's actually changed. What we actually have is when we had a massive improvement in attendance rates. Uh, they were staying for about 3, 4 sessions and then stopping. With me, they were staying for 20 to 25. So that is the difference. When we went for a walk and we walked further away from the school, they opened up a lot more. Of course, with ethicalities and all of that, it's all about kind of getting the right checks, informing the school of the route that you're going to go on, not moving away from that route. So it's very, very much with walking therapy in terms of ethicalities and boundaries. It's all about preparation and about training. Okay. So my training course is about 2 hours long, but it prepares you. It goes through absolutely everything: how to work more creatively, how to use pacing when you're walking, how to maintain boundaries, how you devise your route, the contract you need to develop. Um, and also you need to take in consideration medical history and all of that. I would say that actually, if you want to know what it's actually like, if you've never taken a client for a walk, why not sort of take a friend and not put it into a kind of a kind of a therapy session, but allow them, kind of give them the time to tell you what it's like for them. I can honestly say that I remember being challenged on walking therapy in my early career. I think I was 3 years in. Um, and the person and it went into an editorial, and they said they had this ending session with the client, and the client said, "Can we go for a walk in nature?" And he goes, "Absolutely not." And maintain that boundary. People and human beings aren't idiots. We know what we want. We know what we want, you know? And I think sometimes we need to look at the level of the relationship that we want to have with our clients. Because maybe actually us going outside, if we have intimacy issues as therapists, maybe that's something that actually it makes us uncomfortable for us, because it means that we're drawing closer in the relationship with our clients. And maybe there's a certain detachment that we feel as therapists keeps us out of that, a deepening therapeutic bond with the client. I certainly think that's something for all of us as therapists to actually look at as well, where we keep ourselves so much at a distance that we actually isolate or push a client away. But I think when we're outside in nature, it's not just us who can see the client in a different light. It's allowing the client to see us in a different light as well. And I think that's probably a great place to leave it there.